The Bucs win again when it comes to joint practices. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you 5 days a week along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. Which starters are going to be hitting the field on Saturday, as well as a new injury to talk about and an interesting story from Jason Licht. That's all coming up in a little bit. I'm going to kick this one off today with some of the takeaways from joint practice with the Steelers, and it appears the Bucs won the day yet again, starting with the receivers. So Rick Stroud tweeted out that Mike Evans was absolutely dominant in one-on-ones against the Steelers secondary, more specifically against Jalen Ramsey. Now, Evans has historically gotten the better of Ramsey over the years, and Thursday was no different. Stroud said, quote, Bucs wide receiver Mike Evans couldn't be covered during practice Thursday and won most of his battles with Steelers cornerback Jalen Ramsey, end quote. Beyond that, sounds like Emeka Egbuka and Jalen McMillan were also getting the better of the Steelers secondary. Not only getting the better of Jalen Ramsey, but also guys like Darius Slay and Joey Porter Jr. On the flip side, the Bucs corners were solid in their one-on-one matchups and drills against Steelers wide receivers. The safeties and linebackers, they didn't perform quite as well, but the Bucs receivers and corners were heavily tilted in the Bucs' favor in those matchups. Heading into this practice, Emeka Egbuka talked about how he was looking forward to going up against Jalen Ramsey, which is interesting to hear from a rookie when he's talking about a multi-time all-pro corner. But Egbuka won those matchups throughout practice and made some big plays, including one that went about 40 yards for a touchdown. Now, Bowles was asked about it after practice and said, quote, I think Emeka is going to play the same no matter who he plays against. He's that polished, and he wants to get the better no matter who's out there. Obviously, they've got some Pro Bowl corners over there, which is good work for us as well. This was good to see for him as well, end quote. The offense also won a big 2-minute drill portion of the practice that was capped off by a Mike Evans touchdown. Egbuka was quick to give praise to fellow receiver Jalen McMillan for getting things going. Quote, I thought it was great. I think J-Mac had a ton of great plays. Obviously, I had one that was unfortunately called back, but it's football. That happens. But J-Mac really stepped up big. He had one down the left sideline for a first and 20 yards, and then another one on a tip drill against Jalen Ramsey. So it got us the momentum going into the red zone. Then obviously we're going to Mike in that situation, and he was able to cap it off, end quote. Bowles loved the way the offense finished the practice with that 2-minute drill. Quote, I thought Baker made some great calls at the end. Overall, it was good competition to get to see a team like that, a very physical team, a smart team, practicing against it. It will ebb and flow both ways, and we got some good work today, end quote. Ultimately, we're going to be able to take away a little bit more from this than we would that preseason game. We're going to get into who is playing and who isn't in a little bit, but this was where you were going to see the majority of the true competition. Evan and I talked about it yesterday, where the Bucs started off against one of the worst teams in the league from last year and won the joint practice easily. This time, it's a team that has playoff aspirations to go along with the marquee additions of Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf. So it's a significant jump in competition on both sides of the ball, and the Bucs still won the day in this one, and they did it by showcasing their offense against one of the best defenses from last season. Now, TJ Watt may not be playing on Saturday, but he was out there on Thursday with the rest of the starters on defense, and they just didn't have an answer for the Bucs aerial attack. I also think it was a great test for the revamped secondary. It would have been great if all of the guys in that secondary were healthy for this one, but having to go up against Rodgers is certainly a step up from Cam Ward. And that's nothing against Cam Ward. And even in this stage of Rodgers' career, he's not the same quarterback that he used to be, but he is the smarter and more cerebral quarterback that was going to be able to test the Bucs defense far more than Ward did as a rookie in his first training camp. So I like that Dean and McCullums stepped up to answer the call in that aspect. Bowles even talked about how it was a great test for the entire defense getting to face him in practice on Thursday since he won't be playing on Saturday. Quote, "It teaches you discipline because he's a very good hard count guy. He can see the field better than anybody. So if anybody's tipping a blitz or tipping a coverage in any way, he's going to find it. So it teaches us a lot of discipline," end quote. I think that's also the big takeaway from the joint practice was the things that some of the defenders could get away with against Cam Ward last week, they were not going to be able to get away with on Thursday. Rodgers has seen and done literally everything that you can in the NFL. So you were not going to fool him, and he was going to exploit anything that you did wrong to tip your hand as to what it was that your assignment was going to be. So I completely understand the Steelers not playing him on Saturday. That makes this practice for the defense that much more important and that much more valuable, especially when the defense has been cruising in training camp and beating the Bucs offense more often than not. Like Evan and I talked about on yesterday's show, these guys are seeing their own teammates. They're finding ways to get the upper hand. So these joint practices are so crucial because it tests whether or not they can do that to players that they don't see on a daily basis, that they're not sitting down and studying, they're not game planning for. It's helping the coaching staff evaluate what kind of adjustments that these players are making in real time in order to win their reps, how they are reading and reacting to a situation that they have not truly prepared for. No kerfuffles like there was last week. There were a couple of minor scrums, nothing major, which, these minor scrums are going to be expected at all of these joint practices. But according to Joe Bucs fan, Zion McCullum was in the middle of the biggest of the scrums that happened, and they noted that he was very intense. He was screaming and getting in guys' faces, which is very out of character for him since, as they put it, he's probably the nicest and most polite player on the team. Full disclosure, I absolutely love that. If you can get the nicest guy on the team, someone that I have never seen not smiling, to be that fired up, it means that he's passionate and he cares a lot about what's going on. This is a contract year for Zion McCullum. This is his second year as a full-time starter. So he's looking for his biggest breakout season yet in order to, and hopefully he's getting paid by the Buccaneers. I think that's what he wants. I don't think he's looking to go somewhere else, but he is looking for that big payday. In order to get that, he's got to go out and earn it on the field. So he's taking all of these reps, whether it's a joint practice or training camp or preseason or whatever. He's taking every single snap very seriously and treating everything like it's the final play of a Super Bowl. So I am 100% here for that. Love seeing that kind of passion and fire out of Zion McCullum. It also sounds like we're probably going to see Zion McCullum on Saturday night. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. This year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. I am playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each and every week until there's only one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Todd Bowles was asked about the starters and how many of them we will see in Saturday night's preseason game. Of course, Mike Tomlin had already said that Aaron Rodgers, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, among others, were not going to play on Saturday, but Bowles, it seems, is a little less restrictive. Quote, barring Mike Evans and Lavonte David, everybody else should be ready to play, end quote. That's it. One guy on each side of the ball has been ruled out. Now, obviously, that doesn't include injured players like Antoine Winfield Jr., Morrison, Palmer won't be playing, Roman Peroti's been out all week, Cam Johnson, those guys are not going to be suiting up. But the question that I would have wanted to know, not that Todd would have told anybody, but how much will those starters be playing? Is this going to be their dress rehearsal game where the starters are playing into the third quarter, or is it going to be 2 drives and we're done? Is it like last week where Evan mentioned that Ibuka, McMillan, Charlie Heck, they all played about 10 snaps and then came off the field mid-drive? What is going to be the plan there? And normally I wouldn't think very much of it going into the second preseason game, but you only get 3. And now the Bucs are taking on the Bills in their final preseason game, but they also play them in the regular season. So I can't really imagine that they're going to play the starters much, if at all, in a game where you're really trying to whittle down the final 5 or 6 roster spots and then iron out the practice squad. And you're not going to want your starters out there against a team that you're going to face for real a couple of months from now. My biggest concern is that these starters, if they're limited this week and mostly absent next week, that they aren't going to be ready when it's time to turn it on for real against the Falcons in week 1. At least not as ready as you would want them to be. We see it year after year after year. Teams that hold their starters out for almost all of the preseason, they might play them on 2 drives over 3 games. That team starts off slow. It happens every year. As someone who has to deal with Bengals fans constantly crying about it week 1 every single year because the Bengals always lose in week 1 since none of their starters played in the preseason, it's a very real thing. That's why last week, in Cincinnati's case, they finally said, forget it. They put the entire starting offense out there in the first quarter, and then we watched Burrow and Chase absolutely cook the Eagles in the first 2 drives. They're going to get more playing time this week. I don't want this to be a sure, starters are going to play a couple of drives and then I'll pull them, just to turn around and not play them at all next week either. And I could be wrong. You know, I don't know Todd Bowles' thought process. He and I are not text buddies. I'm not asking him these questions. We're not chatting on the phone, but he may not care like at all that they face Buffalo in the regular season. So he's going to go ahead and let the starters play the entire first half next week before the team gets one last weekend off before the season starts. That's entirely possible. I just personally find it somewhat unlikely. Someone else that's going to make their preseason debut Saturday is Teddy Bridgewater. Bowles was asked about that and said, quote, Teddy is going to make an appearance. Yes, he's very smart. He's played the game a long time and seen a lot of offenses, so he understands offensive schemes. the wording, the language may be different for him, but once he got that down after a few days, we'd like to see him run the offense and we'd like to see him control the game. This makes me even more speculative that the starters are not going to get much time in this game. Now, there's every possibility that the starters get the first quarter, the first 2 possessions. Then you have Kyle Trask come in for a little bit, and then you get Teddy the rest of the way. Like, I don't think the Bucs have any plans on keeping Basilek. So his role may be replaced with Teddy for this game. So you'll see a similar snap count for Bridgewater on Saturday that you saw for Basilek against the Titans. Other than that, there's guys that are going to be going out there and continuing to fight for jobs. Nick Jackson is a dark horse candidate to make the roster at linebacker. You have the receiver battle where Tez Johnson is going to make his debut while Palmer and Cam Johnson are still out. Ryan Miller can keep making his case. Rakim Jarrett is going to look to play much better than he did last week. You had Owen Wright play really well at running back last week. Now Josh Williams is going to get an opportunity there. So there's a potential roster spot opening up on the defense in special teams because of an injury at practice that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So the door is open for guys like Shiloh Sanders and Javion Farr, who joined the team this week, or Rashad Wisdom. There's opportunity to take advantage of a situation. So that's what a lot of the focus will be late in this game, is who is continuing to separate themselves from the rest of the team in order to snag one of those final spots. So you're going to get more of the Buccaneer starters, I think, than you will the Steelers starters. Again, some of their marquee names: Aaron Rodgers, TJ Watt, Hightower. If Rodgers is out, I would imagine DK Metcalf probably isn't playing as well. So you're going to have some of those major names that are out for the Steelers. But for the Bucs, sounds like, on offense, it's anybody except for Mike Evans and then Rashad White because of the injury. We're not going to see him suit up and play, but you're going to get Bucky Irving. You're going to get Sean Tucker. You're going to get Owen Wright. You're going to get Josh Williams. You're going to get all of those guys. Emeka Ibuka is going to line up, as the number 1 receiver in this game. He will be out there with the ones the entire time, might even play a little bit with the 2s, depending on how things go. So you're going into this game with Ibuka and McMillan as your 1 and your 2. Might be a little bit of foreshadowing of what the Bucs are going to look like here in a couple of years in terms of their top 2 wide receivers. And then defensively, you're going to have Servassier Dennis out there on the field. You're going to have Deion Jones. You're probably going to get an increased workload from Nick Jackson because Lavonte's not playing. You still have Anthony Walker Jr. out. Lots and lots of opportunity for these guys. I think this game is going to be far more entertaining than the last one was, but at the same time, go back. If you missed what to watch for or how to watch a preseason game that I talked about last week, I believe it was on Tuesday's episode ahead of the Titans game, go back and watch that. There are ways to watch this where it's going to be entertaining no matter what, but you're going to have a lot more star power for the Buccaneers in this one than you had against the Titans. Which player went down to injury, and did Jason Licht really say that? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, all your investments, all your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. You don't have to juggle multiple apps because let's be honest, if you're juggling multiple apps, chances are you're forgetting to check some of them. Just use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, even plan long-term goals. It's literally a one-stop shop. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, and it is time for some bad news. I'm bringing a lot more bad news than I wanted to bring through 3 weeks of training camp, but it is what it is. Safety J.J. Roberts went down with a knee injury on Thursday and is scheduled to undergo an X-ray and an MRI on Friday. This happened during the special teams period, and although he was able to get off the field under his own power, Rick Stroud is reporting that he has been told it could be a serious injury. Now, Evan Klosky tweeted that Roberts was one of his surprise players that was likely going to make his 53-man roster prediction as secondary depth and a special teamer. Todd Bowles, after practice, said, quote, "I know it was the gunner drill. When I saw him run down the field, he was fine. I don't know what happened at the top of the play. He's going to get some x-rays and an MRI tomorrow." This really stinks for Roberts because he really was a guy that was going to provide enough value for the Bucs to keep on the 53-man roster as safety depth, but also as one of their special teams aces. He was playing outstanding football all camp long. He looked really good on Saturday against the Titans. So I hope it's not a serious injury or not as serious as it's currently feared. But I feel so bad for him. Fingers crossed we get some good news on Friday. It reminds me of the situation the Eagles just went through where they thought they had lost one of their starting offensive linemen for the entire season. Turns out might be back and ready to go for week one. So hopefully that's the kind of news we get on Roberts. But of course, we will update as we get more information. If you're an insider, I will text you as soon as it gets reported what is going on with J.J. Roberts. Finally, I want to talk about an article that was written up in The Athletic about Jason Licht. So this article was written by Dan Pompey, who he does absolutely fantastic work. But this was an exceptionally outstanding piece about Jason Licht's life, where he comes from, how he ended up doing what it is that he does. It was really, really a fantastic read. So if you have not checked it out and you have the ability to do so, I highly recommend it. But I will say this article alone is worth a 1-month price of The Athletic. However, beyond the history of Light's life, the central focus was about his drafts, how he and his team developed the strategy that they now use for when it comes to the kinds of people, not just players, that are on their draft boards, that they sign in free agency, those types of things. It dives into the reservations that Jason Licht had about Jameis Winston, how his wife Blair actually told Jason that he should be comfortable drafting Jameis. Talks about the misses in free agency on guys like Michael Johnson, Alex Collins, Chris Baker, bad decisions like Austin Seferian-Jenkins, Deshaun Jackson, Vernon Hargraves. Licht was on the Pat McAfee show not too long ago, and he was talking about drafting Buccaneer men, that silhouette of Lavonte David that they have up in the building and what it means to be a Buccaneer man. And he said when they make their draft board, they eliminate the a-holes and the douchebags right away. They create a document listing the players that they will not draft because they don't fit the Bucs character profile. Then they submit that document to ownership so that the owners know who is not in the running to join the team. Now, Pompey notes that 4 players that the Bucs had listed in that document this year were taken in the first round, and then they had another one on that document that was taken in the second. Players with criminal histories are immediately disqualified. Then they start their research into who really loves the game, who's going to be coachable, who fits their profile. As Jason Licht has famously mentioned, he'll interview everyone from the coaching staff all the way down to the janitor to see how that person how that player interacts with other people within the building. He's hired private investigators. He has reached out to third parties to get information on these guys. So this is more than just, scratching the surface when it comes to finding the right kinds of players that the Bucs want in the building. One such name that the Bucs drafted and ultimately did not fit the profile was talked about by Jason Licht in this interview. Early in the article, Licht was quoted as saying, quote, "The high draft picks who don't make it are the ones who don't work hard. They don't listen to coaching and they don't do the little things they are supposed to do," end quote. That perfectly describes former top 5 pick Devin White. Light was asked about Devin, and he said, quote, "Knowing what I know now, he would have been off my board. It was too much about him," end quote. It's hard to say that Jason Light is wrong here. Devin is now on his 3rd team in 2 years and has barely seen the field since being benched by Tampa in 2023 and replaced by KJ Britt, starting with that game in Lambeau against the Green Bay Packers when Devin White was a healthy scratch based on a coach's decision. The Eagles signed him, never dressed him, and then they released him. He was picked up by the Texans. They didn't want him back. Now he winds up in Vegas with the Raiders. Do the Bucs win a Super Bowl without him in 2020? I think they do. It may not have been as fun or as flashy, but I think that team was talented enough from top to bottom to win that Super Bowl. Don't get me wrong. Devin White went on an absolute all-time heater in that playoff run, but even if he isn't on the team, that doesn't mean that the Bucs don't win those playoff games, or that at some point Jason Light either drafts a guy that plays, I won't say as well, but plays well enough, or that some other linebacker isn't jumping at the chance to sign with the Bucs and join them to play with Tom Brady for a chance to win a ring. I don't remember who the linebackers were that were available in free agency in 2020, but it's hard to say that the Bucs don't win without it. So I thought it was a kind of a ballsy move, but also really refreshing to see a GM be so open and candid about not just a player that he drafted, but a player that he drafted, didn't re-sign, and is still in the league. Usually you don't get those kinds of stories until the player is retired or the GM doesn't have a job anymore, the coach doesn't have a job anymore, or you get that coach speak and you wind up with the, "Oh, well, I really like so-and-so, but things just didn't work out." Not here. It was flat out, he wasn't who we thought he was. And if we knew that about him at the time, he never would have been a Buck to begin with. At the same time, seems like other teams are starting to learn that lesson as well. I can't say that it surprised me at all what was said. I was just surprised that it was said. That's going to do it for this episode. Please make sure you're coming back tomorrow. I will give you a preview of the game against the Steelers, and then we're going to be back with a reaction podcast Saturday night after the game. Haven't fully decided if I'm going live yet or not. I didn't go live after the first game. Might go live with this one. Tell you what, let me know in the comments or on Twitter. If you're an insider, text me. If you want me to go live after the Steelers game for the reaction, we can do that. Just let me know if that's something that you would be interested in. Until then, please make sure that you check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. You can follow on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs at both of those spots. Make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on. So if I do go live Saturday night, you're going to find out about it. You can join in on all the fun in the live chat. And of course, make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. If you want to support the show, but you don't want to be an insider, it's real simple. Like this episode on YouTube, leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.